Welcome back to Kelowna, British Columbia, and welcome back aboard the PMDG 737. We flew out here from Calgary a couple of days ago, if you saw the previous video about that, and tonight we're going to do the return trip. It's dark and the weather is pretty terrible at both ends of the trip, so it should be reasonably interesting and have a bit of a different color palette. On the subject of the color palette, we'll also be, well, the aircraft will be wearing a different livery. This is from the brand new WestJet Fleet Pack for the 2024 version of the PMDG 737 by Tubkal. Just released today on flightsim.to. Link will be in the description. I think it's rather fetching, really. It's the new livery from introduced in 2018, I think, which only some of the fleet have at this time. It seems like they just get it whenever one goes into the paint shop, so it's been a bit of a slow rollout, but here it is, to the degree that it's really visible in the dark. Let's jump on board the aircraft and get going. So I've already established electrical power from just ground power, and taken care of the initial safety inspection in the interest of saving a little bit of time. So the logical thing to do here is probably just to review the flight plan. So we've got the data from SimBrief on here. Obviously, Kelowna over to Calgary and all that. In terms of the flight plan, the obvious thing to look at here is the weather. Because, yeah, things are pretty ugly right now, but within acceptable parameters, generally. Same thing over at our destination in Calgary. Things are probably going to be pretty close to the limits, but we should be able to land there. And then our alternate is Cranbrook, if need be, although it's not great there either, but again, within the limits. So there's the route, significant weather chart, which surprisingly doesn't have a whole lot on it. I think, well, significant is significant and all that. Anyway, we can probably actually go straight into the CDU pre-flight here. So pull up the OFP, take it down to the route. Yeah, there it is. So into there, we'll just get the IRSs aligned. Charlie, Yankee, Lima, Whiskey. And just grab the GPS position, get that going. And we can request the flight plan. I will set the payload and fuel from that. Unable to record nav performance RMP. Again, that should just be because the IRS isn't aligned, so I'm not too worried about that. Hang on, there we go. Routes on a request. Now I realize I may have just made a little mistake here with my OFP because it is in pounds for the fuel, I think, and the aircraft is in metric. I'm not actually sure what the big jets use in Canada. Certainly in the world of general aviation that I'm in, we still do fuel by weight in pounds, but some people might have moved on. In fact, they might have moved on as far back as the 80s, because that was the cause of the Gimli glider incident, wasn't it? Anyway, I might have to just, well, I can either change what it is in the aircraft, or I can do painstaking conversions from the OFP, or I can just assume that everything's correct. I might end up doing that, if I'm honest. Anyway, loading the route in. Why did I go back to the top? Routing, please. That's probably just going to take a minute. IRS is aligned, so that's nice, I guess. Okay, that's done. So out of Kelowna, we're taking runway 34. No SID, we're just going direct Menbo, which, given the terrain around the airport, might be slightly interesting. I've had a look, and in fact, I'll show you. If you look at the history of this flight, it is just direct Menbo, but if you look at previous ones, they do some kind of curved departure that goes over the city, but it's not any of the published SIDs. But since we're taking runway 34 and going this way, I really am not sure what to do, so we might just have to be kind of aware of the MSA as we go up. So, unfortunately, due to the lack of actual published information on procedures and things, I kind of have to ad-lib some stuff like this. Anyway, so when we get to Calgary, it's going to be ILS 35 right, IGVEP 7 from NORAD. We'll activate that. We'll grab some charts so we can check it. I'm going to check the entire route on the ground here in Kelowna because it's such a short trip. So, just grab the airport chart for here, even though it should not be a tremendously complex taxi. But for the arrival, we'll grab the IGVEP chart for the 35 runways, the ILS for 35 right. We might actually need the Cat 2 or 3 today, depending what conditions are like when we get there. And the ground chart for when we get there. So, airport info and parking positions. Okay, that should be everything we need. I'll actually go to this star here first. So, plan mode, 20 miles should be fine. Membo, NORAD, and then it's pretty much straight into the star from there. So if we have a look at it, it's 14,000 above at Mito, and just sort of having a look at all of these altitudes down on through here. That all seems correct, and then from depth 2 we would get radar vectors, and I'll just do a direct to Tasbu after that, since I'm not using any kind of ATC, and onto the runway. So that all looks reasonably good. So we'll consider that checked. Back to the map page. Clear master caution. And just put that back over here for now. Actually, we won't, because we'll need it for other stuff in just a second here. We can go to performance initialization. So back to the OFP. So cost index will be 10 reserves. We'll be carrying a total reserve of yes, here's where we run into trouble. I'm just gonna switch the aircraft over to Imperial is what I'm going to do. So I think that's in here. Maybe not, actually. For those who know where it is, this is probably going to be pretty annoying. Oh, it's displays, isn't it? I feel like I remember it being page 7, but I could be completely wrong about that. Yeah, there we go. Pounds. Just for the sake of me getting that right. I'll make sure to do that properly in the future. Anyway, reserves. Right. That's going to be 5.2. And 0 fuel weight. We'll check that against what's in here. So that should be 121.4, which it is, and I'm okay to autofill that. Let's see, our flight plan altitude is flight level 330. I don't think we'll be up there for very long, but I'll just take what it's given me there. It's usually reasonably intelligent about it. Wind at top of climb is going to be 265 at 27, so a tailwind, but not a massive one. And the temperature at top of climb will be -47. Really, is that all? Feels like it's almost that cold at ground level right now. Anyway, over to the N1 limit, and we'll use the performance calculator for that. So, departing Kelowna, runway 34. What is the surface condition going to be? How cold is it outside, actually? +1. I'm gonna say it's probably slush. And slush on the surfaces will constitute icing conditions, as will the temperature and the presence of visible moisture, so definitely anti-ice is going to be on at takeoff. And just import weather. That's interesting. ATMNA. But it's given me a rating of takeoff 2. What if I do flaps 10? That doesn't change anything. So I think I just put in TO2 then, but I'm not entirely sure what this actually means, if I'm honest. Okay, well, we'll do that and hope for the best. So TO2, I won't do any climb derate because I have no information about what WestJet SOP is for that. Over to the takeoff page, we'll put in the runway winds and slope. That's 350 at 17. And slope is 0.57. That's kind of substantial. And I don't have any information about noise abatement procedures or the engine out SID for Kelowna, so I'm going to leave all this as default and not put in any kind of engine out SID. So we'll do thrust reduction acceleration to 1500 AGL is the main point there. And after that, I'll proceed on course sort of with awareness of the MSA in mind. I should have a chart on hand for that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Let's see. Departure, Kelowna, what can we use? Does the airport chart have the MSA on it? I don't think so. I'll just grab a random one of the SID charts, how about? Interesting, so that has you go to the Lima Whiskey NDB. You know, this might actually be pretty useful here. So, safe altitude within 100 nautical miles, 12,500 feet. Yeah, I mean, we're in the mountains, so that's not a terribly huge surprise, but in the immediate vicinity of the field, it's even as high as, 8,300 feet, so. Yeah, does this have anything useful for us? Okay, so initial climb for runway 34, inbound track 330 to Lima Whiskey NDB, then climb outbound 330 for vectors to file assigned route. Yeah, that's not super helpful, to be honest, so I might just have to ad-lib that a little bit, like I said. Anyway, back to the actual takeoff performance. Center of gravity. Nope, that's not where that is. That's in here. Takeoff center of gravity should be 24. We'll be using flaps 5. And the performance calculator came up with 134, 134, and 41, and so does the aircraft, so that's nice and reassuring. That is the CDU pre-flight complete. So, now we can get into, let's see, first of all, the safety inspection checklist, I guess. So, surfaces and chocks. Chocks are in for now, so the parking brake is off. Maintenance status checked. Battery is on. Actually, you know what? There's a whole flow I need to do before I do this, so we'll do that now. Yaw damper comes on. Fuel pumps for the wing tanks will come on. There's only fuel in the wing tanks. And I'll start the APU now so that we get some air coming in. Let's see. Signs can come on. Window heat will come on, as will probe heat because we are in freezing conditions. Electric hydraulic pumps over to here. Packs and isolation valve to auto. We'll put the APU bleed on in a minute once that's running. Altitude is going to be 33,000. Landing altitude is going to be 3,550. I do just have that figure memorized for Calgary, but you can also get it by knocking 50 feet off of the altitude figure for the runway on your legs page. So anyway, that's set. Down to the lights. Steady on the position. Logo lights are on because it's nighttime and we need to show off the brand and all that. And that should be that for now. So moving down to the MCP, we'll grab the current weather. So altimeter is 2954 is what that said, as does this. So wind 350 at 17, gusting 23, visibility 9 miles, overcast at 6,600 feet, temperature 1, dew point -5, altimeter 295. Or we'll put that in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and weather and traffic modes need to be on. Well, that makes it look like the weather radar is emitting, so let's leave that off for now. I've not entirely learned the intricacies of dealing with that in 737 yet. So anyway, EFIS is done for my side. I'm not going to bother for the FO side because we're not really going to look at it. Over to the MCP. We'll dial V2 into here, which is 141. The runway heading into here, which is going to be not in there. So back over to the airport chart for that. Runway 34, that's just 340. Nice and easy. And for the altitude, since I'm not using any kind of ATC, I'll just dial the cruise altitude. And flight directors can't come on, and I will arm... Well, actually, no, I won't arm LNAV. I'll do heading select for the lateral navigation after takeoff. Since we're not flying an actual SID. Although, actually, that wanted us to track E30 to that. You know what? I actually will put in the Kelowna NDB. That was, at least for reference, that was the... That was 257, assuming we even have an ADF radio in here. We do. 2, 5. Oh, hang on. Oh, this is a pain. There's 3 layers of knobs. I can't seem to... There we go. 2, 5, 7. There we go. And we'll put that in here. Okie dokie. So after that, along down here, auto brake, RTO, hydraulic system, pressure and quantity is good. Over to the engine page. Lovely. On down to here, trim is going to be 5.2. More or less, anyway. And coming back on down through here, trying to vaguely do things in order, but, you know. Transponder, we'll make sure that's on standby, tilt above, and the Squawk 2000. As I mentioned last time, I'm not going to bother verifying that the trims will move because it takes forever to get them centered again, so just going to have to live with that. Anyway, now the safety inspection checklist. So surfaces and chocks checked, maintenance status checked, battery on, electric hydraulic pumps on. It's up here. Landing gear lever down, and ship's library checked. So, on to before start items, we'll put the APU power onto the buses, put the APU bleed on. Probably should have done that a little while ago. It might be a bit chilly back in the cabin. Yes, it certainly is. Okay. And we'll get all of our ground equipment clear, so as to be ready to initiate the pushback fairly soon. So, ground connections, remove the jetway. It should go in just a second. Yeah, off it goes. You can remove ground power since we're on the bus. I will put the parking brake on and then remove the chocks. So ground vehicles, will release all of those. Come on. There we go. Release ground vehicles, close all the doors. The cargo doors are probably still open. Well, maybe not actually. Wait until this one goes blue. There we go. Arm all doors. And that should be all of that dealt with. So into the before start checklist to the line. IRS mode selectors, nav, gear pins are right back there. Lights test, we've done it. Oxygen test, did that in the safety inspection. Yaw damper is on. Navigation transfer and display switches, manual and auto. Fuel. It's going to be 11,200 pounds on board, balanced, and just in the wing tanks. Cabin utilities and such are on. Emergency exit lights are armed. Fasten seatbelt sign is on. Window heat is on. Air conditioning and pressurization. Packs auto, bleeds on and set. Pressurization mode selector is on auto. Instruments. Cross-checked hydraulics, normal, speed brake down, parking brake set, stabilizer trim, cutout switches, normal. Fire warnings, that's all done. Radios, radar, and transponder are all set. Rudder and aileron trims, free and zero. FMC is set. N1 and IIS bugs are set. Stabilizer trim is set. Performance, weight, and balance is all done. And then it has some pretty irrelevant items here, like phones off, EFB, airplane mode, and stowed. Flight deck windows and cockpit door are actually relevant. Those are closed. And the passengers are seated. Seatbelt sign is on, and presumably the cabin crew would tell us a bit about that. So, anyway, we can probably go straight into the pushback, actually. So I'll do before start below the line as well. So packs will come off. Anti-collision light comes on. Parking brake is set. And transponder out off. And now we can call for pushback. So given the arrangement here in Kelowna with the slightly angular parking positions, we do need to be a little bit careful that we don't trim the aircraft that's next to us. But in principle, if the crew keep it close to the line, that should be fine. So that is planned. We can request pushback. They're prompting us to release parking brake. Parking brake released. And go. Yeah, as long as they get us turning, which they're already doing, yeah, we should be well clear of that. And we're pretty much out of the gate area now, so engine to start. N2. Oil pressure, N1. 25% fuel in. These lights should go out, which they do. And then these lights should go out eventually. Oil pressure light is out. Starter valve light should go out once we get starter cut out, which should be in just a second or two here. There it is. Starter cutout and valve light is out. Engine stabilized. Starting 1. And 2. Oil pressure and 1. 25%. In goes the fuel. And those lights have gone out. Oil pressure light is out. Pushback's complete. Set the parking brake and just dismiss that. And from that point we can assume ground equipment is clear due to the simplistic nature of that utility. And starter cutout. Starter valve. Open light is out. Engine stabilized. So engines can go over to the generators. APU off. Ground equipment is clear. Start switches can go to continuous. Probe heat is already on because we're in freezing conditions. Engine anti-ice will come on as well. Packs to auto. APU bleed off. Isolation valve to auto. Flaps set to 5. Start levers, idle to tent. Do a quick flight controls check. That is all good. Whack the recall. And clear that engine display. And the before taxi checklist. So, generators on, APU off, start switches continuous, probe heat on, anti-ice on, air conditioning, packs auto, bleeds on, engine bleeds that is. Isolation valve is on auto. Flaps, 5 required, 5 set, green light. Stabilizer trim, 5.2 units required, 5.2 units set. Start levers are at idle to tent, flight controls are checked, and recall has been checked. So, at this point, we're ready to taxi. Pop the taxi light on. It's going to be a very short taxi, so we'll pop into the before takeoff checklist pretty much immediately once we're rolling. So, config. Test that on the initial roll by very briefly pushing the thrust levers all the way forward so that it would engage the takeoff config warning if it were going to. Flaps, 5, green light, stabilizer trim, 5.2 units set. Takeoff briefing. I didn't really brief it formally, but assume reviewed. And cabin, we'll press the bing bong to get that secure. And that's the before takeoff checklist to the line complete. Now, if you have a look at the Kelowna ground chart, what you'll see is that we'll do a very short backtrack down to the end of 3-4 here, and line up that way. And that's just up ahead of us here. Very short taxi, like I said. And since we're about to enter the runway, make sure the strobes are on. And tell you what, I'll actually just put all the lights on now as we enter. Approach path is clear. At least insofar as it's possible to tell in present conditions. Tell you what, I'll put the terrain display on the FO side because that's absolutely going to be relevant to our climb out. And we'll just line up using the bay on the left side here. So for lineup items, lights are already on. Auto throttle is armed. Navigation is going to be heading select. Transponder probably should have gone to Tara when we entered the runway, but anyway. And then before takeoff checklist below the line and trying to taxi at the same time. So MCP set, transponder, Tara, tilt above, strobes on, landing lights on, before takeoff checklist to the line complete. We will make this a rolling takeoff then, if I can not make a complete pig's breakfast of the lineup. And I'll just do a slight S-turn. Alright, 40% stable. Toga! Checked. View and rotate. You're up. Alright, that's 400 feet. Autopilot in. Heading select 330. And that's us up through the, well, up past the thrust reduction and acceleration point, so we'll just bug up. And that's V2 plus 15, flaps 1. Flaps up. And at that point, I will bug 250 knots. And just keep a bit of an eye on the first officer's terrain display here. I might just maintain this heading for a little bit, maybe even until we pass the Lima Whiskey NDB there. And then I'll do direct Menbo. Right, so after takeoff items, pressurization, checked, start switches. I think I'm going to leave those on until we're clear of the muck here. Landing gear lever to auto brakes off. And after takeoff checklist, air conditioning, pressurization, very quick L check. Engine start switches, again, gonna leave those on for now. Landing gear off, auto brake off, flaps up, no lights, altimeter set. And we have passed Lima Whiskey NDB. Terrain display looks pretty good. Direct Menbo, LNAV, and VNAV. And just continue to monitor that terrain display as we climb. And any ice accumulating on the windshield wipers. I would not be shocked if that were the case. A little bit hard to tell with how dark it is, admittedly. Right, that's 10,000, so lights off. And do the logo light with that as well, because no one's going to see it up here anyway. So fuel balanced, lights off, APU off. Pressurization checked. Differential is close to 4,000, or yeah, well, close to 4. Yeah, 4 psi. The 4 number in the gauge is more or less what we expect. Everything else is set as it should be. Seatbelt sign, I'm definitely going to leave for now, and then obligatory recall. And terrain is looking good. I'm not too worried about that at this point. Especially since we're coming up on the 100-mile MSA as well. That was 12,500 feet if I remember correctly, so that should be no trouble. I think that's the town of Vernon down on our left there. Aircraft is still jittering a bit as it accelerates. We're definitely experiencing a few bumps here. But climbing pretty rapidly, as to be expected since we didn't do a derate. You know, I say I don't know what WestJet SOP is as regards engine derates, but I wonder if I might be able to find out. I'll look it up sometime. Okay, that Lima Whiskey NDB isn't terribly relevant anymore, so we'll switch over to VOR on the display here. Now, how much distance between top of climb and top of descent? Like 40 miles, which is really, like, absolutely bugger all. As I understand it in the 737, you need to be level for about 20 minutes before you break even on the amount of fuel that it took you to climb to a higher altitude. And we're not going to be, but oh well. For the sake of having everything go as close to according to plan as possible, I'm just going to leave that be. We could theoretically level off at like 310 or something, but the aircraft's already set up for 330. We'll just go to 330 for simplicity's sake. Coming up on 18,000, set standard. which is a pretty big jump because it was down in the 295s before, so standard set, passing 189. Now, let's check against the other ones. And I think we're out of the worst of the bumps, so we can let the passengers get up for at least a little bit, since it is a short trip. Start selectors can go off as well. Probably should have done that a little earlier. And anti-ice. We're probably going to go through this cloud here, so I'll leave that on just a little bit longer, but apart from that, there's probably not too much else to add until we're actually starting down into Calgary, so I will probably come back when we're more or less reaching that point. Right, so we're not even quite level at 330 yet, but I'm already probably going to be jumping into my descent planning. Also going to limit the vertical speed on the last 2,000 to go here. That's just, as I understand it, a practice to prevent false TCAS warnings aboard other aircraft. You do 2,000 feet a minute when you've got 2,000 feet to go, and 1,000 feet a minute when you've got 1,000 feet to go. So, anyway, that's all set. We'll just pop VNAV back in once we're level. Anyway, for descent preparation items, we'll grab the weather for Calgary. So, let's see. Wind 350 at 8 knots. Visibility 1.25 miles. Snow. Overcast 500 feet. Temperature -14. Dew point -15. Altimeter 2946. Temperature -14, so we are going to have to do some cold temperature altimeter correction. So that'll be a little bit of extra work. Anyway, altimeter 2946. We'll just preset that for when we head down. And I've already got the charts, so we'll pull that up for reference. Over to the descent page here, we'll do 250 knots at 10,000 as the speed constraint, and we will also request some descent winds, which may alter the position of our top of descent. Might actually move it up a bit because we've got a tailwind, so we might be starting down really immediately. So just waiting on those descent winds already. Load those in and execute. And yeah, that didn't move our top of descent very much, but it is a closing in. Yeah, it's in 20 miles, which will be just a few minutes, I think. Yeah, 3 minutes. So actually I will interrupt my work order a little bit to grab an altitude to put into the MCP so that can start down on its own, and also VNAV. Yep. 6,500, that'll probably start down whilst I'm still working through this stuff here, so we've got all that in. Over to the fixed page, that'll be a runway 35 right. And we'll just do the 10 and 5 mile rings. I won't bother doing the bigger one for top of descent reference because we're so close to that already. We checked the route earlier already, so in terms of what's next, that's going to be the ILS frequency and course. So 110.75, 345. Whoops. So that is in minimums. Now, what was our weather again? Do we need to shoot a Cat 2? Or potentially even a Cat 3? Let's see, we're a quarter. I think we will be good to shoot a regular Cat 1 ILS. If not, then, well, we'll go around and shoot the, well, you know what? Yeah, we'll shoot the Cat 1. So minimums for that's going to be 3,777 barrow, which will take a minute to put in. That was, yeah, 3,777. Lovely. And we've started down, so that's all good. So now I'll do the landing performance calculation, why not? And now this seems to automatically account for what your actual weight is going to be at landing, or at least it tries to calculate one when you import this, so we'll just leave that be. We'll do auto brakes 1. Anti-ice is almost certainly going to be on. And we use a decent chunk of the runway there. We probably actually want to vacate about halfway down. Because if you look at, yeah. Realistically, we probably want to vacate on Delta 2 would be nice. Delta 4 is probably a bit more realistic, so I might do auto brakes 2 for that. Yeah, we should definitely make Delta 4 with that, and, you know what, we will credit the reversers, because the condition of the runway is probably not going to be great. But yeah, I would say that's actually not going to be dry. That'll probably be, like, dry snow. Not that that changes very much. Okay, so auto brake speed 2. And now, the thing that we do need to do, because it's so chuffing cold down there, is cold temperature altimeter correction. So the temperature in Calgary, minus 14. So, first thing we do for that is I'm just going to pull up the cold temperature altimeter correction chart that I have on my phone. I'll probably put one up on screen if I can remember as well. And the first thing we do is correct the MSA. So MSA for the star is going to be, looks like 9,300 feet on this side. Now, the fact that we're descending over the mountains suggests that it might be relevant to do all of these as well, but, I don't know, we'll check. Anyway, the initial corrected MSA, it'll be 13.1 down here. MSA for the vicinity of the field is 9,300 feet. So if the temperature indicates, we'll use the conservative figure of minus 20. 9,000, holy moly. Take the 5,000 figure plus the 4,000 figure plus the 300 figure, so that's 710, 570, 50. So that comes out to a corrected MSA of 10,630 feet for the vicinity of the field. And so we need to correct everything that's below that, which is, well, everything really. So Irvug, 10,000, that is technically outside the MSA ring, but it's so close I'll do it anyway, so 10,000 above actually needs to be, hoi hoi hoi. I'm not very good at this sort of thing. Anyway, 710 plus, oh, well, yeah. Plus, it's 11,420 feet. What waypoint was that again? Irvug. That's going to be 11,420 above. And, yeah, okay, yeah, that'll work. And for, let's see, 9,000 at Vesga, that's going to be, let's see, 5,000 figure plus 4,000 figure, 710, 570. $10,280. And what's next? Avtis 8,000. So we need to add 570, 570. Apologies, this is slightly tedious. That comes out to 9,140 feet. Hang on. Oh, we're not actually going to that waypoint, because then it's Meska Depth 2. And the only other hard altitude for that is going to be 6,500. But that's for the final approach fix, and we don't correct that. So I think we're done here. I won't be surprised if I've done this wrong. But there you go. Anyway, back to the descent page. On our way down, passing about 238 right now. Okay, well, we'll sink the heading bug. And that bump was probably a pretty good prompt to put the seatbelt sign back on. Get people seated a little bit earlier because I expect it to be reasonably bumpy on the way down. So, descent checklist, pressurization, landing altitude, 3,550 set. Anti-ice will probably come on relatively shortly once we get into the clouds. Approach briefing and fuel, we've kind of BS'd that. IS and altitude bugs set. And we're below 300, so bank angle limiter goes back up to 25 degrees. And that's probably going to be about it for now. I'll come back once we're a little closer to Calgary, probably. Welcome back. We're just about getting to the point of starting the approach into Calgary here. It'll just be a bit of a right turn and then left over towards the final approach fix. We'll be hitting 10,000 feet reasonably soon. So far we've been meeting constraints and are more or less on the correct descent path. We got a decel point coming up to make 220 knots at Vesca, but the aircraft shouldn't have any particular trouble making that. Not picking up the ILS just yet, but that's not such a big surprise. It's going to be India Romeo Foxtrot when we do. That is crossed out for now, and then we have, we're actually getting DME on it. Interesting. Anyway, we're about close enough to 10,000 feet, so we'll do that 10,000 foot flaps mnemonic check again. So fuel is balanced. Lights, fixed landing lights, turn-offs are going to come on. I'll also put the logo light on, so that we are representing the company and all that to anyone who can actually see us. Angle of bank is at 25 degrees, as it should be. Pressurization, we'll have a quick look at that. That all looks good, and the seatbelt sign is on. That's something that I have a bit of a habit of forgetting, so nice to have done that at the appropriate time. And recall, of course. So that's us through 10,000, and pretty much on our way down. So once we've passed depth 2 and we're just onto this vector segment, I'll do direct TASPU, and the aircraft should be able to make that descent down to 6,500 at that point. Little bit of weather over the field, if the weather radar is to be believed, which its implementation in Flight Sim 2024 is not exactly ideal, so hard to say there. Terrain on the FO's display is not actually going to be super relevant, because now that we're out of the mountains, the whole area is pretty flat. So I'll shut that off for the sake of decluttering. Okay, the aircraft does need to get rid of a bit of speed here. It's not asking me for drag, but I'm going to give it some anyway. Yeah, there it goes. Just a few more seconds and it should be alright. There. That'll do for now. Let's see, we're in the clouds. Verify that my engine anti-ice is on. I don't see any ice forming, so we'll leave the wing anti-ice off for now. And you know what? I'm just gonna get rid of that vector segment so the aircraft will start to turn on its own. Sync the heading bug, why not? Even though it will be changing immediately. It was 167, whatever. And probably as good a time as any for the frisk check, so frequencies... 110.75, range rings, we put them in. Idents, we've got it. DME is alive. Standby instruments, checked, and courses, 345 is in. Approach checklist, altimeter and instruments, set and cross-checked. Approach aids, checked and set. Approach checklist complete. 1,000 to go-ish. Fairly bumpy, but we were more or less expecting that. And now that we're pointing in vaguely the right direction, I'll arm approach. And set the heading bug to the final approach heading, 345. And we should grab the localizer in just a bit here. And 6,500. Now, like I said before, if I'm remembering correctly, you don't correct the final approach fix altitude. I don't know. I'm kind of in over my head with this stuff. I should have reviewed the cold weather procedures a little bit, but oh well. I have an uneasy feeling that I screwed it up, but I don't know. We made it down all right. We didn't fly perilously close to any terrain as far as I could tell, so I don't know what to make of that. We'll put out flaps 5 reasonably soon. In fact, I think I'll do speed intervene and bug up for now, just to get rid of a little bit of energy in anticipation of that. And this time I will run my bloody landing checklist like I forgot to do last time. And once again, I'm not really sure how one goes about checking for ice in the dark, but engine anti-ice is on for now. I feel like we would almost certainly be accumulating ice on the wings, and I probably should have the wing anti-ice on just for based on that assumption, but in principle, you're not supposed to turn it on until you actually see ice, because it's a de-icer rather than an anti-icer, even though it calls itself an anti-icer, if that makes any sense. Oh boy, flaps 5, please. And we'll bug that. Localizer is captured. Should get the glide slope in just a few seconds here. It is alive. And tell you what, double check my VREF figure, because I kind of BS that. Okay, yeah, we have basically no crosswind component, so a VREF additive of 5 will be perfectly fine, so VREF is 145 knots. Okay. And, oh yeah, I'm supposed to put that in here as well. Hoi hoi. Done.
2,500.
That's checked. I wish the speed would come back a little bit more, but I'll give the aircraft some time to try and get rid of that speed and get down to 163. Coming up on the 5-mile range ring, at which point we will put gear down and set flaps 15. Yeah, close enough. I'll do it now since I need the extra drag. Gear down, flaps 15. And I think we should see the runway within Cat 1 minima, so that shouldn't be a problem. Because I can see the lights of the city, and I have a pretty good idea where the airport is relative to this. So. It's relatively scenic. Well, scenic might be the wrong word, but interesting to look at, let's say, on the way in. And I'll have that for my thumbnail, please and thanks. Alright, flaps 30. And VREF set. And that's also about 1,000 feet above the aerodrome, so I think we can consider that stable, and we'll carry on down. And I have the runway in sight, so that's no problem. I'll sync up my thrust levers, and auto throttle off, autopilot off, my aircraft. A little more power, just easing it up to get back on there. Okay. Things are reasonably smooth, not encountering any major bumpiness yet, although probably shouldn't have said anything there.
Approaching minimums.
Oh, I forgot my landing checklist. Oh boy. Start switches, continuous, recall, Forget it. Landing. We got slightly high on glide slope, but we'll be okay.
100. 50. 30. 20. 10.
Spoilers are the really important thing. Oh well, I've just embarrassed myself again. All that serenity. I should have run that before I disengaged the autopilot. That's what monopolized my attention. We'll call that the lesson learned, I guess. Yeah. Oh well. Manual brakes. Not sure if that's Delta 4 or not. I think it is. Ugh. Alright. Clean her up. Speed brake stowed. I'll actually leave the flaps down now that I think about it, because if there's any possibility of ice on the aircraft, you do want to leave those down. So that they don't cause any damage on retraction. Alright. Ground chart, where the hell am I? I think I'm on taxiway Delta 4, but best not to assume. Yes, I am. Okay. That's alright then. We'll just take the inner taxiway Bravo on in here. And as soon as we're in a straight line, I'll complete the rest of my after landing items. Okay, put on a little bit of power. Well, we probably actually shouldn't taxi too fast if the surface might be contaminated. Anyway, lights. Position lights. Steady. Landing lights. Come on, give me that click spot. Off, there we go. Taxi light. On. Turn off lights I'll leave on just so that we have a little bit of extra light. Transponder. Alt off. Flaps. I'm going to leave those down. Trim. We'll set 4 units. Auto brake is off. MFD to the engine page. Flight directors off. Speed to 100 and altitude to 3,100. I think the reason you do that is so that the next crew remembers to enter their first cleared altitude when they get their IFR clearance or something like that, because this wouldn't... an added 100 feet is not one you're going to get for that. Anyway, start switches off. I forgot to put them on like an idiot. And probe heat will remain on because we are in freezing conditions. Lights are still good. I'll start the APU now while I'm thinking about it. And we're going to want to turn right on taxiway Echo, because our gate is over here, I think, Charlie 59. So, hang on. Is that this one? No. Echo, Echo, Echo. That's up here. Alright. And once again, I'm keeping the taxi speed kind of slow because the surface is contaminated. Okay, so taxiway Echo. And Charlie 59. Oh, it's right on the end of Charlie. Okay. That's our designated gate. If FSLTL has its has an aircraft parked there will just go to A gate at Charlie Terminal. Technically, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie are all domestic terminals, so we could park at any one, and our passengers would probably end up where they're supposed to be. So Delta and Echo are over here. Well, Delta is for the rest of the world, and Echo is for US. Because for those who don't know, from most Canadian airports, if you're flying to the United States, you clear US customs on this end before you go. I think that's the case for some other places as well, but yeah, most Canadian international airports have that. It's different, but it's also kind of convenient, to be honest, because it means when you get to your destination, you can kind of just go and not have to worry about it. The only time I've cleared US customs in the United States was coming back from Mexico via Houston. Oddly enough. Anyway. But yeah, this is all Delta and Echo over here, which is the fancy new terminal that was completed in 2016, whereas Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie are all a bit of a big ramshackle structure that basically started as a shed in World War II and had little bits added to it over time. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. It's not as efficient of an operation. We'll put it that way. So, yeah, that's the nub of Delta Terminal there, and we're going to the nub of Charlie, and it looks like we might actually have our pick of spots over there, so might even be able to go to the correct one. So the APU is running, that's all good. Nothing else to see to at this point. The point where I think, oh, am I forgetting something, is the point where there's nothing more to do, and, you know. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's Charlie 59, so we will go there. Cool. I'll put the turn-off lights now because this apron is reasonably well lit. This is the FSIM Studios Calgary Airport scenery, incidentally, so it's all quite detailed and quite accurate. So that's nice, I guess. And as we approach 59, I'll pop the taxi light off. There we are. Yep, 59. And I'll actually let the speed come back. It probably shouldn't even be more than 5 knots, but good enough. And in the absence of any kind of marshaller, I will self-marshal. Let's see, do we have aircraft-specific markings here? No, we just have nebulous, like, categories of, Oh, that might be, like, your... Well, actually, I don't know. I'll roll forward a bit. But now it's stopped, so... We'll go to the Charlie one. Because that should get our back end off the, well... That A321's all the way up at the Bravo one. Whatever. We're here. Parking brake on. APU onto the buses. 2 blues, 1 red. Engine's dead. Seatbelt sign off. And we'll put the beacon off once we get down to 20% and 2 and get on with the rest of the shutdown. I'll put the dome light on since night vision no longer matters terribly much. Alright. Beacon off, and we'll get our ground services going before I do the rest of the shutdown, so disarm those doors. Set the chocks, so parking brake can be released. Jetway. I will grab ground power and actually maybe ground air a little bit later on as well, because that does seem to be a common fixture here in Calgary during the winter time. And do the cargo. Open the door, why not? Okay, back to our main shutdown items. So, fuel pumps, I'll put those off with the exception of the one that's supplying the APU. APU gen is on the buses, so electrical is good. Seatbelt sign off, window heat can come off. Probe heat can probably come off. This is probably the last flight of the day, so. Anti-ice can come off. Did I miss the hydraulic pumps? Where those will come. Oh, right here. Electric hydraulic pumps off. Air conditioning packs to auto. Engine bleeds on. APU bleed on. For now. Exterior lights. That's all good. Start switches off. Grumble, grumble. Auto brake off. Speed brakes down. Flaps. Right. Actually, we probably need these back on, but we'll assume the ground crew have inspected the flaps and unwedged any ice that might have been blocking them. We'll bring those up. Which is probably going to take all bloody night to do. Yeah, they are coming up. Anyway. Parking brake is actually off because the chocks are in. Start levers are cut off. Weather radar is off. Transponder. 2000 standby. See, I did forget the transponder tilt. Oops. And just verify that those flaps come up and put the hydraulic pumps off. 2, 1. I believe in you. You can do it. Leading edge flaps in transit. Yay. Up they are. Flaps up. No lights. Electric hydraulic pumps off. And that is it for our immediate shutdown. Tell you what. I'll grab ground power and air. But if we put ground air on, the packs need to come off. And over to external power. So APU can come off along with its requisite fuel pump. And that really is about everything done. So now we can finally go and say goodbye to our passengers. And yes, to the surprise of no one, they've all buggered off already because it took so long for the flaps to come up that they could probably read War and Peace and half the Bible and then get out of the airplane before I was in a position to say bye-bye. So, on that slightly tedious note of shutdown procedures, it is time to end. I hope that this has been at least reasonably interesting to watch, and any screw-ups I may have committed... Oh boy, there's that air conditioning unit. Any screw-ups I may have committed were, well, within the bounds of tolerability, and that will be it, I think. Toodles.